My name is Michael Hughes, Dr. Michael Hughes. I'm a chiropractor in Loveland. I practice with my identical twin brother, which is fun. But it is fun practicing my brother. His name is Dave. And we've talked about our whole lives practicing together ever since we were little kids. And so it's really fun to be able to practice with them. Okay, so what I want to do, today we're going to be talking about a little bit more emphasis on energy, but I want to talk about that's what the request was on energy. We can take this a whole bunch of different ways. So, you know, if we open up for questions, you guys have some questions or some other ways you want to be able to talk about, we most certainly can do that. I remember one time I went in and did a presentation. There was about, I don't know, 35 nurses, a couple medical doctors, and when they introduced me up to the stage, the first thing I asked was, what organ are we trained keeps the body alive? And what do you think most of them said?
The heart.
Heart.
Yeah, everybody said the heart. And then the medical doctor back in the back goes, nurses, because that was not the best answer. But what do you think is the best answer?
I would have thought the brain.
Right, the brain.
Okay.
And then I asked the question, what keeps the brain alive? And this nurse up front goes, ooh, you just got deep. Why'd she say that?
I don't really think
I don't
about how the brain.
Spine.
Yeah.
So I'll let you think about that for a minute. What keeps the brain alive? Okay. All right. So I practice in Loveland, Colorado. So Gateway Family Chiropractic has been in Loveland since 1987. I almost don't look old enough to run the practice that long because I haven't. We acquired it from a retiring doc, and but we've been serving our community here at Gateway for a long time. And so there's a few things I want to share with you just in way of our practice, and we'll talk about chiropractic a little bit more. But does anybody, I know you've been to a chiropractor, obviously. Anybody else, y'all ever been to a chiropractor before?
No.
Okay, no?
My buddy's a chiropractor.
Right on, awesome. So what I want to talk about is just really what, a little bit about chiropractic, but we're going to talk about a little bit of science. We're going to be talking about anatomy, physiology, neurology, and so we can kind of break down like what chiropractic really does and then how that would apply to energy or many other health concerns, okay? So the first thing I want to be able to share with you guys is, let's look at a slide here. I don't have one for all of you guys, but we have a nerve chart here. This nerve chart, I'll share with this where this actually came from. The research behind this is pretty fascinating. So you can see here that this is in Gray's Anatomy, is where we pull this information out. And so if you look at all of the different nerves and where they come out of the spine, they're all going to control a certain body part. And then if the body part is not working right, then there's a list of symptoms that might be related as well if there's pressure on the nervous system, okay? And I'm going to talk a little bit about pressure on the nervous system here in a little bit. So where they found out this information, or where the research that came behind this is, I don't know, I think it was like 1940 or 50 or whatever it was, and they took thousands of people in the study, and they wanted to find out where these nerves would go, and what would happen is they wind up putting pressure on the nerve. So they literally would put pressure into the spine in different areas, left side, right side, both sides, and they had some people who had placebos, with no pressure. They had some people that would have, C1, C2, C3, all the way down the spine, and they broke them up in different categories and different people. And so what they found out is that almost, can't remember the exact number, but it was almost every single person in the study wind up having some type of a symptom or a problem that was that the whole group would have a related problem. And so, and then if it was C1, then they would have certain problems. If it was C2, they would have certain problems. And so anyway, that's where they got this information from, is they actually would, just like a garden hose, go in there and pinch down on the nerve, not so barbaric, but they would just put pressure on it. And they would pinch down on it just like a garden hose. Now the water flow isn't coming through. The nerve impulses are not able to transfer it through the, it's like a electric wire, right? Like you think of a fuse panel in your house, So if you trip a switch, you're going to lose something downstream on that wire. It's not going to work, and the nervous system works exactly like that. So this is where they got this information from, so it's pretty fascinating. I used to work in a very large medical pain clinic here in northern Colorado about 16 years ago. Really funny story, because so we got lots of referrals from the medical side. So they're like, look, instead of doing surgeries and and all this other stuff. Why don't you go see Dr. Hughes and his team and see if we can wind up, getting you better, more naturally. And so they sent a lot of patients over, and after a certain period of time, the medical director walks up to me and he goes, "What is all this voodoo crap you keep talking to my patients about?" And I'm like, "Oh, voodoo? I'm doing a report with one of my patients in 30 minutes. Why don't you come in and go see if there's any voodoo being taught?" It was all anatomy, physiology, neurology. It was all basic stuff. And so anyway, he sits down, about half of it, walks out. And then I walked up to him afterwards and I said, "Did you hear any voodoo?" And he's just shaking his head. He goes, "Man, you chiropractors are crazy." And I said, "Why is that?" He goes, "I get it. I get everything you were saying. We just don't think like that." Isn't that interesting?
Mm-hmm.
So really when it comes down to, what he's talking about is it's basic anatomy and it's a holistic approach. So the body has been broken into, in our health, in the Western medicine, has broken it up into a machine. So it's like, oh, your heart doesn't work. Let's just take it out, you put in a new heart. So, or even from a chemical standpoint with medicine, it's like, oh, well, the chemical reaction is not working. Let's stick in a chemical that changes that reaction, right? So it really comes down to basic science and understanding how the body works. But a holistic concept is sometimes foreign to some people who have a mechanistic or machine kind of philosophy or understanding or training. And let me explain what I explain by that. Like if the heart's bad, they put in a heart, right? So you can't put in a heart without affecting the whole. Just like you can't give a medicine for low back pain that doesn't affect the entire cells of the body. So there's a holistic concept, and that's one thing that makes, I think, chiropractic very unique, is that it takes the entire whole body into play. So I want to break down the nervous system, because now this is the entire nervous system, right? So this is motor nervous system, sensory, and autonomic. So let's talk about autonomic a little bit more, because this is going to be important when it comes to understanding the difference of energy or low energy. So here's the autonomic nervous system, and over here you've got the sympathetic division and parasympathetic division, okay? So you've got the nervous system broken up in two different parts and the nerves that would control that. So I'm not going to go into the details of that because it can get pretty deep. But what I do want to understand is the difference between parasympathetic and sympathetic. And I'll just assume that nobody has had neurology or doesn't have that explanation, but let's go through that. So sympathetic is just fight or flight, stress, right? So what does your body do if a rabid dog is chasing you, right? You're probably going to get adrenaline pumping in your veins. Stress hormones are going to go everywhere to give you superhuman speed to get fight or flight, right? And so you guys are eating right now, so that's going to switch you right over to parasympathetic. So sympathetic is eating, breathing, or sleeping. So if you are doing those things, then you're going to wind up being more parasympathetic dominant. And if you are stressed out, and that stress doesn't need to be a rabid dog, it could be an 8-hour workday that's super stressful, with a demanding boss, So any of those things can wind up moving you into a sympathetic stress. Now, I'm going to focus mostly on sympathetic stress, because if you understand the effects of what that does to your body, then it winds up, you'll understand why energy is so related to that. Okay, so when you have a stressful situation, not only are you having the stress hormones, what are some of the other things that are going to happen? Eyes will dilate so that you can get more vision into your eyes, fight or flight. Think about that scenario, right? You're going to have blood going through your peripherals, to your arms and legs, so that you fight or flight, and you're leaving it from your gut, right? So if your parasympathetic is kicking in, you want to bring it in from your arms and legs and bring the blood into your gut so you can digest the food. So those things you can't be in both at the same time. It's one or the other. You're either back and forth, and literally your thoughts will change that. Your thoughts will have you going to parasympathetic or going to sympathetic. So now let's talk about chronic sympathetic. If you're dominant and you're more dominant in sympathetic part of your nervous system, then your body is going to be super stressed out and it's going to be fatigued. You're going to be burning way more energy than necessary, and it's going to wind up causing several other things to happen. Like as a chiropractor, one of the things that we see, people say all the time, how come not holding my adjustment? Or why am I so misaligned? Why are my vertebrae twisted and putting pressure on the nervous system? We call that a subluxation. A subluxation is a misalignment of vertebrae. So if you were to stack, a couple vertebrae here, you got a disc in between it, and the nerves come out of that hole right here, right? So if you wind up causing any type of a misalignment and it gets stuck, misaligned, here's a misalignment, right? So this nerve obviously will be compressed, okay? So whatever this nerve goes to is not gonna function 100%, can't, won't, just not gonna happen, okay? So that's what a chiropractor is looking for, is they're looking for where's those misalignments putting pressure on the nervous system and removing that. We're the only doctors that receive the training on that for detecting and correcting vertebral subluxations. Nobody else, they might have a weekend seminar, but they're not gonna go to school the whole entire time like we do. So anyway, so that is a misalignment. And it's important to be able to understand the effects of a misalignment and what it will do to the body. Let me share with you a story. This lady here, this is an x-ray of a patient that came in, and she's 40 years old, not now, but when she came in, she's...
Not me?
Nope. When she came in, she was, she had already gone through all of this testing, went and saw several medical doctors and different doctors in town, and they ran CTs, MRIs, blood panels, all kinds of stuff. They said, you're fine, there's nothing wrong. She was like, look, I feel like I'm dying. I am not fine. Now, when she walks in, if she were to walk in the room, you'd be like, yeah, she's a beautiful, slender lady. It looks like there's nothing wrong with you. Surely you're healthy, right? She looks healthy, but she's not healthy, right? Something is wrong with her body to the point where she's driving down the road and her 13-year-old daughter has to grab the steering wheel just to keep her from crashing because she fainted, right? So that's not normal. So anyway, so she comes in, we take an x-ray, and it's going to be hard for you guys to be able to see this, but can you see the first vertebrae? Can you see there's a difference there? Do y'all see that? It looks different, right?
Yeah.
Do y'all see the first vertebrae, how it looks different? Okay, so this is when she came in. This is a normal x-ray. This is what it should look like. So what this is you have the spinal cord, right? There's a hole where the nervous system goes through, and then you also have spinal nerves that come out here. Well, the central canal is what that's called. That has in the brain stem where this is coming through right here, there's 38 billion neurons that go through that. And what she's doing is that if you were to take that first vertebrae is very unique looking, the atlas. If you were to take a picture of it, you shouldn't see that it has a ring, right? So if you take an x-ray, you can't see that. You just see, one side paired up with the other side, it just looks flat. But if I twist it, now it looks like a ring. And that's what happened, is that her vertebrae were so rotated on that C1 that it was literally pinching down on 38 billion neurons, and who knows what downstream below that is going to be affected, right? For her, she literally felt like she was dying. Chronic headaches, what else she had? I can't remember. Headaches, neck pain, and she felt like she was dying. That was her history. And daily headaches. So anyway, as we're adjusting her, she was just like,
Was it caused by anything, like a car accident, or?
It could have been, I don't know what it was caused by. I can't remember what that was, but yes, something is going to cause something to do this. It just doesn't, actually, this could have happened over a long period of time, but it didn't become symptomatic to a certain point. So let me address that, because that's
Counting pills.
Yeah, right. If you're just counting it up.
Machines now.
Yeah. So let's look at, if you looked at a nerve, how a nerve works. So the sensory portion is only about 10% of the nervous system. So 45% is autonomic, 45% is motor. We can control motor, but we can't control autonomic. It just does what it does. And 10% is sensory. Most of the sensory neurons, the impulses travel on the outside of the nerve. So that way it's not going through as much matter. It's literally just bouncing off of, it looks like a sausage, right? And you've got these messages, the sensory input is transferring from one sausage to another, from the neuron to neuron. And so if you put pressure on the outside of that nerve, what's the first thing you affect? Sensory. So then you have pain, right? So as soon as you get that to happen, it's really easy. The first thing that happens is that you wind up getting sensory to come back, but you still have pressure on the nerves, and you could feel great, but still be weakened and still be sick. So you can have atrophy of the muscles, you can have atrophy of the neurons, because of the pressure if it's been there for a very long period of time. And so just because the pressure's off, sensory now is communicating, you still might have atrophy of that nerve and it's still not functioning at 100%. That takes a while to heal that process up. Does that make sense? So when you ask how long was this there, for her, if you go, most people you ask, well, how long have you been dealing with that? Oh yeah, the problem started when I started feigning at the wheel. No, that's not when the problem started. The problem started when it was misaligned, right? Putting pressure on the nervous system, choking off that nerve flow. So yeah, good question. So when did it start? It was probably way before she started having symptoms. But anyway, so we did wind up taking a post x-ray here in about 6 months later, and it is absolutely textbook perfect. So it's exactly what it should look like. And she said literally for her, it was like, I feel like I'm 20 years old again. And so way more energy, headaches are completely gone. And it's pretty cool. I mean, it's such a cool experience for her. She wanted to bring in her whole family under care. Everyone has problems. I mean, we treat babies, infants, all the time. We just wound up treating a 11-week-old baby that came in. It was so cute. And so anyway, when I was working at medical clinic, it was really funny because the medical assistants didn't know that chiropractors would, they only, their knowledge is, oh, they treat neck pain, back pain, pain, right? And so they don't understand that chiropractors treat the nervous system. They don't treat pain. We're treating where there's an interference in the nervous communication. And so anyway, so I bring this baby in to get adjusted, and they about lost their minds. They were like, what would you possibly need to do to adjust the baby? And so it was like, as a nervous system, I'm going to check to make sure it's optimal. We're functioning the way it should. So anyway, so that was an education for them to be able to see that. But babies, it's so different, when you're adjusting them. Matter of fact, I'll share a story with my brother, Tony. When he was born, he was diagnosed as a bubble baby. And so they brought him out with forceps. He was over 10 pounds. It was so traumatic on my mom, it broke her tailbone during the delivery process. So they used these forceps and wound up pulling an enormous amount of pressure on his spine. And so whenever he first came out, it was like, hey, happy baby, here's a healthy baby boy. His APCAR scores were all perfect. And then all of a sudden, within hours, his suckle reflex goes away. He's not nursing. Now they have to do synthetic formulas. He started getting rashes and boils all over his body, and he was literally fading away. And they were taking him from doctor to doctor. Nobody knew what was wrong. Finally, my dad, the last prognosis was put him in an incubator. He might live a couple of more months. And so my dad was like, I'm not okay with that. Takes him to a chiropractor. Says, is there anything you do to save my son's life? And he says, can't make any promises, but it's not going to hurt. Let's see what we find out. So that's where they found out the trauma of the birth. And so he winds up doing his first adjustment on his atlas, finds out there's upper cervical damage, pushes about as hard as you would push on your eyeball before it gets uncomfortable. That's how gentle it is with babies. And all of a sudden, his white pale skin turned flush pink. And it startled my mom. And she's like, whoa, what just happened? And so he's like, oh, it's great. He's just received the adjustment. Let's bring him back a couple more times. We'll see how he's doing. And so anyway, there was no other explanation other than chiropractic saved my brother's life. He was on death's door. He was fading away. I mean, he was skinny as skin and bones, couldn't eat anything, allergic to everything he's tasted, touched, smelled, anything. It was just killing him.
So what was the guess on that as far as was the misalignment interrupting what part of the nervous system?
Probably everything. So, it would, there was an allergic response. So, his immune system wasn't working the way it was supposed to. His maybe cardiovascular wasn't working. I don't remember all that stuff, but I do know when you have upper cervical damage, it would be very similar to that patient I was just talking about. So she is having a global health problems, right?
Yeah.
Like the body's just not working right. And think about this too, you got 38 billion neurons. If that's the case, how do you quantify that? How do you know it's these 10,000 neurons that go to this certain part of the body, or this million neurons that go into this part of the body? You can't really determine where and what that pressure is going to do to those neurons. Does that make sense? So kind of hard to be able to determine that. However, the chiropractor was astute enough to be able to recognize there wasn't a proper alignment in the upper cervical and address that. And as soon as he does, then like that baby you had the other day, it was colicky, super cranky, really sad too, because the dad was so frustrated with the baby. It was their first child, and the baby just would not stop screaming, bloody murder. It's just like, he's like, I don't even want to hold this kid. It was so sad. And so anyway, she was just at her wit's end. She's like, I don't know what to do. I've tried everything. And so finally, somebody recommended to come in, and we started, as soon as I started touching the baby's skull, where the misalignment was, the baby started to calm down, and it started not crying and being all fidgety and stuff. And then his neck was like this whenever he walked in. And then as I'm working it, I'm just kind of distracting the neck just a little bit. And that neck grew like a dang giraffe, I mean, it's just going longer and longer. And the mom's like, oh my gosh. And then anyway, after the appointment was over, she's holding her baby and she's crying because she's like, I don't know this kid. Like, my kid doesn't act like this. So for her, it was such a huge experience that, it was awesome. So so babies can come out subluxated, it's misaligned. It's actually very common for that. Usually you'll find very common in a normal delivery, you'll find a right atlas, you're gonna find maybe a shoulder problem, hip problem, and a knee problem. So very common in kids. So what happens if we don't get those fixed? If we wind up living our whole entire lives and we never fix that misalignment in the beginning, and it doesn't self-heal or self-correct, which we do have a really powerful self-healing, ability, if we cut ourselves, what's the very first thing that happens?
Clots.
Right? Clots, right? It's not gonna bleed forever, it just bleeds for a little bit, it clots up. So there's clotting mechanisms that go down there. And let me talk about that for a second, because that is just, when you really think about how brilliant and intelligent our body is, it's almost mind-blowing. Because I have a video of a prick to a finger of a nail. So there's this little hole, and you can see it under an electron microscope. And so you can see the cells as the red blood cells going through the capillaries one at a time. That's the detail that you can see, right? And so you see the puncture, you see the cells going through, and then white blood cells are big. They're way bigger than red blood cells. And they tracked it over a 15-minute period of time. You can see these white blood cells immediately rushing to the wound site to wind up doing its job to protect it from invaders, bacteria, viruses, whatever else might come through that. Is that crazy? So anyway, so the body has this really powerful self-healing ability to the point where it clots, then it's going to send down some fibrous tissues to the point where you may not even know that there was a cut there, right? So it does have this ability to be able to self-heal, even from an adjustment standpoint. As we're breathing, our ribs are going up and down, and all of those joints in our spine, they're all self-adjusting, right? And it's to a point where it gets so far out of alignment or so stuck and so irritated, it can't self-heal anymore, and that's when it starts screaming at us with back pain saying, I can't fix this anymore, take me to the chiropractor to fix it, right? So we need to listen to our bodies because it's super smart, and when it starts screaming at us, it's screaming at us to be able to fix it and hopefully do that in a natural way. So, all right, cool. Any questions about that? That's fun, isn't it?
Well, I've got actually, so the story of your brother, is that what prompted you to take this path?
It is. Yeah, so me and my twin brother, we're younger than Tony, he's my oldest brother. And so when that happened, that was the first time that my family had ever used a chiropractor. And so at that point it was like, wait, we gotta start using chiropractors more often. So my dad was real quick to take us to a chiropractor when there was like sicknesses or problems, broken arms and medical issues or things like that. Yeah, there's a time and place, right? But that was not the first stop. The first stop was usually gonna be the chiropractor. So we grew up in a household that was pretty normal for us. And then as we were looking at careers and what we wanted to do, I kind of was gravitating towards the health field. I was thinking about surgery, and I'm talking about like 14 years old when I'm starting to make that decision, And then I was like, why would I not go to a chiropractor? I was like, I agree with everything they do. Like that's the lifestyle I want. That's what I want to do and how I want to heal people. So that's when I made that decision. I was literally 14 years old. And both my twin brother and I both made that decision together. Yeah.
Cool.
I do want to share with you guys a couple other case studies. So these are really cool. So one thing I want to talk about is how important it is. Has any of you guys had a full spine x-ray in the last several years? Anybody?
Nope.
Yep. I would recommend that, and if you haven't and you don't know what it looks like, you should go get one. And the reason why is because you should keep them on your records, like keep your own records. As a custodian of the x-rays, I take them, I'm responsible to keep them for 10 years, and so you should keep that as a historical data. And the reason why is because you want to see, is your body getting worse, or are you doing something to make it better, right? Your spine. So here's an example here of, this is really hard to see, but first of all, in this one here, when they first came in, you can see it's a reverse cervical curve, so that it should have a curve that goes like this, right? And so this is reversed. Their head would look better if we flipped it around, right? So, and there's obviously some major trauma in this disc. You can see that disc is frozen together. It's completely grown together with calcification and bone spurring, and the disc doesn't, it's not even visible there. You can see the black areas between the vertebrae here, but right there you can't see a whole lot of black, right? So that disc is almost completely gone. And then because of this trauma that she's had here in this area, it wind up getting worse and worse, and so did the head forward posture, right? So the head just started moving more and more forward. So one of the things we started working with is trying to get this patient to get that posture to come back. And if you notice here, this is really awesome. That disc is starting to grow back. Do you see the black line, the difference between the two?
Yeah.
So the disc can grow back, but it will never grow back if that head is forward, okay? It's just, it's constant pressure on the injury site that's already there. So if you can wind up getting the curve reestablished, then you're gonna wind up getting, giving that disc the opportunity to heal up. So we get a brand new spine every 10 years. Do you know that? A brand new skeleton. So what that means is the cells that exist today, 10 years later, all of those cells have been replaced. So it's replacing brand new cells, but is it growing new cells in a healthy environment or a sick environment, right? So if you're giving it the proper environment, then it can wind up regenerating healthier cells and re-heal that disc, okay? Now it may not be perfect, and you may not be able to get rid of some of the bone spurring. That's permanent calcification that's grown bone on bone. So maybe that won't all go away, but can we get the curve to be better? Sure, there's a lot we can do for that. Now I do want to talk about how important having proper curves, spinal curves, are in the body. Remember, the pressure that puts on the nervous system comes from misalignments. Comes from, that misalignment could be a vertebrae, a single vertebrae putting pressure on the nervous system, or it could be from an improper curvature, that head forward posture, right? And we get that working, right? If we're working at a desk job all day long, that becomes a major problem. By the way, if you haven't created this habit, this is a great habit. If you're sitting at a desk for 8 hours, you should make a habit of even setting an alarm to train yourself to do this about every 2 hours. Take it where you can wind up pulling your head back and your shoulders back, almost like you're pinching a pencil with your shoulder blades. And then hold that for like 30 seconds, and it's enough to reset that neurology for the next couple hours. So that's a really good way to combat that. But I want to talk about,
Like this?
Yep, just hold it back.
And your neck back?
All the way back. Hold it for 30 seconds, and you'll be
Okay.
good.
I know you told me that before, and I
Yeah.
forgot.
Yep,
Those
it's
shoulder blades.
Yep. And so another thing, you think, we're talking about stress, sympathetic stress. Look at what animals do whenever they're under stress, okay? Look at a cat. What does a cat do? Right?
Yeah.
The back hunches up, right? What does a human do? Have you ever seen one that's under total stress? Think about someone who's being totally pulverized and beat up by somebody. What do? Fetal position,
Yeah.
right? So we're kind of doing the same thing that other animals do whenever we're super stressed out. So what happens whenever we don't feel like we're being pulverized? What are we still doing? It doesn't matter, sympathetic's kicking in, our body's still going to react, it just may not react the exact same way. Here's what happens: roll the shoulders, head forward posture, right? Fetal position. These muscles start to contract when sympathetic stress starts to affect us. So when it starts getting worse and worse, we get more and more head forward posture, our shoulders start to roll more, and we're going to go on getting headaches, neck pain because of that posture, chronic posture. So now, when I was first in practice, we didn't have mobile devices. I practiced in Texas. Well, the first time I was graduating in Texas in 2000, and whenever I first started seeing patients, they weren't sitting around gaming all the time and with mobile devices all day long. And so back then, if I were to take an x-ray of a teenager, it was rare to see someone who did not have a curve. I mean, if they didn't have a curve, they had major trauma. There was something seriously wrong, okay? This lady comes in, and she winds up having her daughter. She was going to put her on ADD, Ritalin, and so crazy, right? She's like 10 years old, out of control. Everyone in her family can't stand her. About to get kicked out of school, failing out of all of her classes. I mean, right? I mean, so anyway, really bad situation, and she is at her wit's end. The nurses at school are giving her pressure. Listen, you need to go get some medication. Like this girl needs some help. And so anyway, she didn't want to do that because of the side effects of psychotropic drugs. So she wound up looking for alternatives, and she wound up hearing about a lecture I was doing at the public library at the time. And she comes in thinking, you know, what's the solution? You know, this medication's the only solution. That's what I got to do, but I want to learn more about it. So she comes in. I'm not talking about medication. I'm talking about natural ways to be able to deal with this. And so anyway, as we're talking, she just interrupted the presentation. She just goes, I'm at my wit's end. What do I need to do? I said, look, I've got a machine in my office that I can scan the nervous system, the autonomic, motor, and the sensory input, and I can scan it, and I'm telling you, if it shows up like a Christmas tree, I know I can help your daughter. And so she goes, I'm bringing her in. So we scan her with this machine, lights up like a Christmas tree. I go, because of this, I want to take some x-rays. So we wanted to take in some x-rays, and she has a reverse cervical neck. That is something you just didn't see back then with teenagers very often. So I said, something major happened. What happened? And she goes, I mean, immediately they know. She fell head first off of a trampoline. She knew that that's what it was. She walked it off. You're fine. You're fine. You know, she wasn't fine. Mm-hmm. So anyway, so we wind up doing an adjustment. Her very first adjustment was on a Thursday evening. She went home, and their family had family dinner, and then she sat down at the table, which is, none of this is normal. Sat down at with the family to have her food. Usually she picks her food, runs around the house, and you know, grabs a little bit of food, runs around the house. Sat down the entire meal, ate the whole meal, went, threw up, and went to bed. Okay, none of that was normal. Like, they thought she was sick. She probably was detoxing from the adjustment. Mm-hmm. And so, anyway, so she winds up going to bed, sleeps all night. Mom has to wake her up. That's unusual. She goes to school. Her teacher calls and said, I just want you to know the medication is working. That's how fast it changed this girl's life. And then even the church Sunday school, whatever, teacher called and said she was the best behaved girl in the classroom. So anyway, that's my twin brother. Is that what?
Oh yeah. You're calling yourself that?
I know, exactly. So so the curve, the reason why I think it's so important that people know that is because this is not like orthotics on teeth, right? This is not like, ooh, I have an ugly spine. I think if we wore our spine on the outside of our bodies, we'd be a whole lot more concerned about that, right?
Yeah.
So, but the nervous system is absolutely controlled by that. So if we wind up having a head forward posture all the time, or if we take an x-ray and we see improper curvatures of the spine, we know that there's going to be a problem in the body. And you can literally trace it down. Like, where's L3 go to? Lumbar 3.
Bronco tube.
No, L3 down the bottom, that orange.
Sex organs, uterus, bladder, knees.
Yep, knees. I can tell you, if somebody comes in with knee problems, I'll go look at L3, and almost 100% of the time there's going to be some type of misalignment there, all the time. So if that's not addressed, and here's the thing, knee problems are rarely addressed. It's one of those things that just is a chronic problem. It's always there, but chiropractic is very effective at wind up dealing with that. Okay, so now all of this that we said, I'm going to segue back to energy. Okay, so now we have a good foundation of some basic sciences of how the body works, but let's go back and circle back how this works. So if you have a misalignment, putting pressure on the nervous system, what will happen is that eventually it will cause a symptom, a body signal, right? Your body's going to be like, ow, that hurts. If it's chronic and not addressed or suppressed by medication and not really fixed, then what happens is the body eventually will just numb it up. It'll just go, I don't want to feel that irritation anymore, and it literally disassociates the neurons from that area and just says, don't want to feel it. So then what happens, these people come into the office, and I go, oh, you have a misalignment right here, and I touch them with a finger, and they go, ow, I didn't even know that hurt. And the reason why is because I'm hitting that area that's misaligned. I'm looking for those misaligned areas, and as soon as I touch it, it feels like a bruise. And they've disassociated. Their brain has been able, I don't want to feel that anymore. But as soon as I touch it, it goes back to the brain to go, hey, we got a problem here, okay? So people can ignore those problems, and it will stay there, and what will happen is it will atrophy, well, the nerves and the muscles are eventually going to atrophy. But what's worse is that you're going to wind up getting degeneration. Degenerative disc disease, arthritic facet joints, you're going to have something happen. That bone it's not going to stay there in a healthy state. It's going to degenerate. And so a lot of people think, well, isn't it the process of aging? It's not the process of aging. I've had x-rays. I have x-rays of 70-year-olds that look like 40-year-olds. They are fantastic, perfect curves, no damage to their spine. They took really good care of their spine, right? So this is, it's not the process of aging, it's really the process of spinal neglect. If somebody doesn't take care of their spine, it's going to degenerate. And so anyway, now what happens is that you have all of these misalignments throughout their spine. You could have bad knees, right? We've talked about all these different ways that you can wind up having these misalignments. The body's going to wind up removing that nervous system. That is called low chronic inflammation, low chronic grade inflammation. That's the diagnosis of that. And so that's whenever you touch somebody's misalignment and all of a sudden it winds up, ow, that hurts. That is inflammation that your body has disassociated with. And that's what happens with low-grade chronic inflammation. Inflammation, different story, right? You're going to feel that. You're going to have all kinds of, your body's going to produce all kinds of, chemicals to wind up sending messages to the brain that there is a problem, there's something wrong. We have inflammation, we have swelling, we have edema. And so low chronic inflammation, it's not necessarily the case. So now when you have all of this throughout your body, now what happens is sympathetic nervous system is constantly firing because it's a stressor. It doesn't know that there's a rabid dog, or it doesn't know that there's stress is stress. It doesn't know the difference. All of the physiological processes of stress are all going to be happening in your body. Does that make sense? So if you have all of these misalignments, here's what happens. Adrenaline gets pumped into your veins. If it's not burned up through fight or flight, right, you're just sedentary, then it converts over to cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone. It's a precursor to every disease on the planet. It winds up causing fat storage. So if we wind up having all of these misalignments, now our body's stacking on all of this fat, and we're wondering why we can't lose weight. It's because we haven't addressed the root cause. So that's what chiropractors do, is they get to the root cause of why the body's not functioning at 100%. Our body was built and designed to function at 100%, but when there's interference from the communication to the brain to the body and the body back to the brain, it's not going to function at 100%. It can't. It's just physically not possible. And that's why chiropractors and patients that go to chiropractors, they experience some of the healthiest lives that are even possible, is because we are allowing their body, removing that interference, allowing their body to express 100% of optimal health. And when they have those misalignments, putting pressure on the nervous system or causing that low-grade inflammation, it is a energy drainer. It is going to completely drain our energy, especially when sympathetic is firing all day long. So we go home and we're like, oh, I'm exhausted. I just want to get a bite to eat and go to bed, right? We don't have the energy to be able to get through the day because we're spending it all day long on all these processes thinking there's a threat, and so that's why, it could be a nutritional threat. And let's talk about that for a second. Some people go, oh, well, I'll just take the proper nutrition. That's true too, but you better be doing chiropractic, because chiropractic is the nervous system, right? That's going to allow the nervous system to be able to absorb all of the good nutrition that we're taking, right? And then y'all know the difference between synthetic and non-synthetic nutrition. Mm-hmm. So if you're taking supplements, because we all should be, because the food supply is deprived of some don't even, some of the nutrition and minerals don't even exist in our food supply anymore. It's literally just been depleted through all the farming. Yeah. So you're not going to get it, so we should be supplementing. If we're not supplementing with good whole food supplements, it actually is doing more harm than good. So there's actually research that shows that synthetic Synthetic supplements would be the same thing as taking a medication. It's probably not going to hurt you as bad, but it's going to take a toll. And there's research that actually shows that synthetic supplements can even lead to cancer. So your body doesn't know how to assimilate that. It knows that it's not natural. It knows that it was synthetically made, and so the body just rejects it. And there's side effects when there's a rejection. And so when it's a whole food supplement, it's easy for the body to assimilate. It knows the body's intelligent enough to know that it's a natural supplement, that it's a whole food supplement, and it winds up absorbing that, and it can process it and use that minerals or supplements or whatever it is as it was intended to be used. So anyway, so keep that in mind. So if we are deficient in our B vitamins or vitamin D, omega-3, those are probably some of the most important supplements that we should be taking. If we're deficient in B vitamins, we're going to be low in energy. So, but are we getting good food to be able to get the B vitamins in our body? And if we're not eating good, healthy food, we can get B vitamins out of food, but good, healthy food. But are we getting enough of that? If we're not, we need a supplement. And if we supplement and it's still low of energy, you got to get back to the root cause. The nervous system is not functioning the way it's supposed to. Make sense? It's pretty cool. All right. So anyway, what I want to do is just in closing, what I'll do is I like to offer you guys to allow us to be able to bring you guys some food to hook you guys up. And I'd be happy to have any of you guys come in, and I would encourage you to come in and get checked. I would put our exam up to any doctor in town. We do about 7 to 8 thorough tests. It takes about 45 minutes for us to go through all the information. We put together about a 10 to 12 page detailed report with your x-rays if we need to do that. And we'll go through all of that stuff to be able to determine exactly what is wrong with your body. Everyone that comes in learns a ton that they never knew about their body. So I would encourage you to be able to do that. You can take advantage of this referral coupon to be able to come in. Normally it'd be hundreds of dollars to be able to have the exam. And we'd be happy to do that for only $47. So anyway, and other than that, there's really no other obligation to be able to, start care. What we want to do is help people understand where their health crises might be starting from. Where is it originating from? And it is usually very eye-opening